Vaginal gymnastics. The ability to squeeze, milk, whip, lock, and even twist a partner inside of you using only your pelvic floor muscles. Women like Cleopatra, Diane de Poitiers, and Wallis Simpson allegedly used this secret practice to enchant the most powerful men from history and bend them to their will. But is this really achievable? Can any woman master these divine feminine skills? And more importantly, is there anything that we can gain from it, or is it all just about men's pleasure? In this video, I'm going to answer all of those questions. I'm going to dive deep into the science of how this all works, and I'm going to give you a step-by-step plan for you to get started if you want to become the ultimate femme fatale. One warning though, do not use this on men that you don't really like. Trust me, you won't know how to get them to stop calling you. Let's dive in. Hey guys, I'm Belle DiLorenzo, founder of Goddess.com and author of the best-selling book, The Goddess Method. We teach women throughout the world the practice of Pompoir, or how I like to call it, vaginal gymnastics, advanced pelvic floor training designed to naturally enhance female pleasure, boost libido, and multiply orgasms. And I'm pretty sure I just answered one of our questions from before. What do women get out of learning this stuff? I'm glad you asked. When I first heard of the term pompoir, it was always in the context of some historical figure who different authors claimed was able to use her sexual prowess to completely enamor men, thus gaining political power at a time where, honestly, women didn't have any. In ancient Greece, for example, the hetairas were amongst the only women allowed inside the symposiums. These parties where men would talk gossip, philosophy, and basically get obliterated with alcohol. In Dr. Catherine Blackledge's 2020 book, Raising the Skirt, these famous entertainers were known to be able to, and I quote, split a clay phallus using their vaginal muscles. Let's move from Greece to Egypt, much like Cleopatra, another woman who these skills are often attributed to. In fact, Kimanami calls hers the vagina that launched 1,000 ships. And fun fact, Pompoir is often referred to as the Cleopatra clench. Who knows, maybe this is the reason why Julius Caesar favored Cleopatra over her brother Ptolemy, which led to the siege of Alexandria in 47 BC. Imagine having the greatest Roman emperor wrapped around your finger?
Your wish is my command.
Now, I have a full video on the history of Pompoir if you want to check it out, and I'll link to it somewhere on screen. But let me give you one final example of a woman using her hoo-ha to gain political power. This is Wallis Simpson, the woman who single-handedly scandalized British society when King Edward VIII fell head over heels for her and abdicated the throne so that they could get married. Wallis was twice divorced, American, in her 40s, and had no money or prospects. From the moment these two got together, the world wondered and vicious minds speculated about how this woman could possibly enchant Edward to the point of him broadcasting from Windsor Castle that he could no longer be king without the woman he loved. I'm not crying, you're crying. Now, these two aren't people that we should romanticize or admire, at all, but it's still interesting to speculate on what happened here. According to lecturer Anne Seba, Queen Mary, Edward's disapproving mother, had compiled a China dossier where she kept a close record of Wallis's trip to China back in 1924, before she met Edward. Apparently, her then husband Wen took Wallis to quite a few brothels in Hong Kong, where she learned the art of the Chinese clench or the Shanghai squeeze. And in case there's any doubt left, yes, we're talking about vaginal skills.
Apparently she has certain skills acquired in an establishment in Shanghai.
So here we have 3 stories of women throughout history who made men fall to their knees, allegedly through their vaginal superpowers. But wait a second, all of these stories are about women giving pleasure to men. However, when I first developed my own method of training this through a lot of practice with an overly eager boyfriend and a lot of learning of vaginal biomechanics, I quickly realized all the benefits this practice had for me. And when we started teaching this to women throughout the world, we ran a lot of informal research that directly coincided with my findings. I'm talking about benefits that far supersede getting breakfast in bed from very, very happy partners. And I'm not kidding about this last part. But what about formal research? Well, while we don't have any research on vaginal gymnastics specifically, because this is a very niche practice that very few women in the world know how to do, we do have quite a bit of research on more basic forms of pelvic floor training, such as Kegels. For example, this 2015 systematic review of pelvic floor muscle training literature showed that most studies reported a significant improvement in female sexual function scores, which considers desire, arousal, lubrication, orgasm, satisfaction, and pain, after pelvic floor muscle training was introduced. This 2017 randomized clinical trial of postmenopausal women showed that after 12 weeks of basic Kegel training, the scores of arousal, orgasm, and satisfaction in the intervention group were significantly higher compared to the control group. And this 2010 retrospective chart review of 176 women showed that those with strong or moderate pelvic floors scored significantly higher in the arousal and orgasmic domains of the female sexual function index than those with weak pelvic floors. Now, don't get me wrong, we still need a lot of research on this. Most studies on pelvic floor training are performed on women who are already suffering from urinary incontinence or sexual dysfunction, and they show how this type of training can reverse those effects regardless of age. And this is amazing. But what I would like to see is a study performed on women with already healthy pelvic floors that shows what happens when we train them at an elite level, like we do with vaginal gymnastics. To understand how someone can achieve these levels of vaginal control, we need to look at the anatomy of the pelvic floor muscles. The levator ani is the main structure of the pelvic floor, and it's made up of three parts: the coccygeus, the pubococcygeus, and the iliococcygeus. As you can see, these three muscles run in different directions and surround the vaginal canal. This is important because it means that different movements will stimulate different regions of the muscle structure better. This concept is called regional hypertrophy, and this is where things get really interesting. Or at least, I find them interesting. I wasn't very cool in high school. I'm going to be using the pec muscles as an example, as they've been studied a heck of a lot more than the pelvic floor muscles, at least as far as muscle training goes. Studies show that some exercises or exercise variation, like the incline bench press, will work the clavicular head better, while the decline chest press will activate the costal head of the chest better. And this is not all. If we divide the chest muscles across a horizontal axis, we can also see that different exercises will work the inner parts of the chest better than the outer sides of the pecs, and vice versa. And this same concept is observed across the different muscles of the body. A 2021 study compared the effects of two leg exercises, the Smith machine squats versus the machine leg extensions, and they found that the Smith machine squats showed more activation of both the proximal and mid quad, while showing very little activation of the distal quad. On the other hand, leg extensions showed less activation of the proximal and mid quads, but dramatically overperformed in distal quad activation. Now, what does any of this have to do with vaginal gymnastics? Well, it has everything to do with it, because the muscles that surround the vagina work like any other muscle in our body. Let me show you what I mean. Just like we can divide the chest muscles through a vertical axis, we can do this with the pelvic floor. We call this the transverse plane of the vaginal canal, with different vertical levels up. Some Pompoir exercises like fluttering will work the entrance of the vagina more. Some exercises like squeezing will work the middle of the vagina more. And some exercises like deep pulses will work the top of the vagina more. But guess what? Just like we have a right pec and a left pec, just like we have a right bicep and a left bicep, we also can divide the vaginal muscles through a horizontal axis and talk about the muscles on the right side of the vagina and the left side of the vagina. And when we isolate these vaginal walls, we can create movements that move along what we call the frontal plane of the vaginal canal. Some of these include tilting, bouncing, and rubbing. Finally, because the vagina is a tube, it is also surrounded by muscles at the front and at the back, which means that we can divide it along a third dimension and talk about the front wall and the back wall of the vaginal canal. We call this plane of movement the sagittal plane, and some vaginal skills that we can do across this plane are rocking, massaging, and controlling. So by dividing the muscles surrounding the vagina in three vertical levels up, as well as the lateral sides and the front and back walls, we can see that we have 12 unique regions of movement. Part of what we do in the Olympus program is we teach you how to identify and move all of these unique regions. And the more you train them, the more sensitive you're going to become, and the better stimulating each of these regions will feel. But what I really wanted to get across in this section is that the reason there are so many different vaginal exercises we can do is that we can combine these different planes of motion to create unique sensations both for you and your partner. Now, I can talk about this for ages, but I'd rather get to the practical side of this video and give you some exercises to get started. If you want to learn more about how all of this works inside your body, check out my Science of Vaginal Gymnastics videos, for which I have a part 1 and a part 2. I'm going to do a shameless plug here and tell you that if you want the most comprehensive guide on the art of vaginal gymnastics and you're a do-it-yourself kind of person ready to understand how all of this works and start putting together your own program, you should definitely check out my book, The Goddess Method. On the other hand, if you want to join a community of goddesses around the world and learn this practice step by step through visual animations, a weekly schedule of workouts, and even a vaginal guitar hero game, join our course, the Olympus program. You pay once and get access for life with all of our regular updates and new exercise lessons. Okay, let's see how I would go about learning this if I was starting from scratch. Now, I want to give you an actual workout here and not something too basic, so I'm going to be referring you to a bunch of free resources I have if you need help with any particular exercise. Just like we covered in the previous section, there are 3 planes of movement of the vagina. We have the transverse plane, where we do up and down moves. We have the frontal plane, where we do left and right moves. And we have the sagittal plane, where we do front and back moves. Let's assume that you've got 30 minutes to train 3 times a week. What I would do is I would focus on each individual plane of motion on each individual day. And I would also throw in some multiplanar moves on each of those days. Multiplanar moves are more complex skills that involve more than one plane of motion at the same time. On Mondays, we'll train the foundations of strength, speed, and mobility through the transverse plane. The movements of this plane resemble your standard Kegels, and I made an entire video that you can follow to learn the different types of contractions you can do. What I would do is 3 sets of 20 fast contractions, 3 sets of 10 long contractions ranging from 10 to 30 second stops, 3 sets of 10 eccentric contractions, and, if you can, finish with 3 sets of 10 milking techniques. I explain the milking technique on our free guide that you can download at goddess.com/free guide. Essentially, milking is a full range of motion contraction, where you slowly contract all the way up, identifying 10 vertical levels, and then you slowly release all the way down, identifying 10 vertical levels. It's as if you were taking a marble ball through an elevator, from the 1st to the 10th floor, and then back down from the 10th to the 1st. Now, at first, it's going to feel quite hard to identify, to feel all of those vertical levels, but with training and practice, you'll be able to identify and eventually control all of those tiny regions of muscle fibers. Now, throughout all of this Monday workout, I want you to breathe naturally through your nose. I want you to inhale and exhale completely normally through your nose as if you were smelling a rose. And I want you to never, ever, ever hold your breath while you do any of these exercises. And after your practice, I want you to take 5 minutes to properly relax and stretch out your pelvic floor muscles. And you do this by adopting some of the following positions: the child's pose, the happy baby pose, the sphinx, and the yogi squat. On Wednesdays, I would focus on the frontal plane, as in the right and left walls of the vagina. And specifically, I would focus on the squeezing motion. Now, squeezing is perhaps the most complex move for people to master. Not because it is particularly hard, because it isn't, but because it kind of unlocks every other move in vaginal gymnastics. In other words, if you can effectively master squeezing, you can pretty much perform every other Pompoir move out there. Kind of like if you learn all the piano chords, you can pretty much perform any pop song out there. Yes, I'm a music geek as well. They really shouldn't allow me to have a sex company. Just so you can mentally visualize it, contracting or kegling is pulling up, thus shortening the vaginal canal, and squeezing is pressing in, thus narrowing the vaginal canal. What I would do on Wednesdays, once you understand this difference, is perform a few squeezing variations, such as 3 sets of 10 normal squeezes, 3 sets of 10 full squeezes, as in trying to squeeze at different vertical levels of the vagina. Here's where we start involving 2 planes of motion at the same time. Let's imagine that the vagina is divided into 3 vertical levels: Level 1 at the entrance, level 2 where the G-spot is, and level 3 at the top near the cervix. One full squeeze is where you first squeeze but only at level 1, then you squeeze only at level 2, and then you squeeze only at level 3. Then I want you to do 3 sets of 20 alternated, isolated squeezes. As in, squeezing but only with the right wall while keeping the left wall relaxed, and then squeezing but only with the left wall while keeping the right wall relaxed. Mastering isolations is key in vaginal gymnastics, as many complex skills such as twisting or caressing will require you to focus on tiny regions of the vagina. Now again, through this Wednesday workout, I want you to breathe normally through your nose, never holding your breath. And I want you to take 5 minutes at the end of your workout to relax your pelvic floor and stretch it out by adopting one of the positions we talked about before. And finally, we've got the Friday workout where we'll focus on the sagittal plane and do front and back movements. This plane is actually easier to master than the frontal plane because the front and back walls of the vagina are closer together than the lateral sides. This is why doctors use a speculum to open you up for an examination. Because squeezing the front and back walls together is easier than squeezing the sides, I'm going to challenge you with some more complex moves. First, I want you to do 3 sets of 10 repetitions of an exercise we call rocking. Just like in squeeze isolations, you're going to press with the front of your vagina while the back relaxes, and then press with the back of your vagina while the front relaxes. And you'll be alternating between those isolated squeezes back and forth. For more help with this, go to our sagittal plane playlist on Instagram, where I cover exactly how to activate these 2 walls. Then you're going to follow that up with 3 sets of 10 massages. The massaging skill is kind of like side isolations, only that instead of squeezing, we're going to be alternating between contracting the front wall and contracting the back wall. That's right. I'm going to ask you to contract but only with the front as the back relaxes, and then contract but only with the back as the front relaxes. If you try to imagine what this feels like for your partner, you'll understand just why we call it massaging. Let's just say it's a very, very pleasurable skill that creates a lot of friction between the two of you. And to finish your Friday session, we're going to be doing a triplanar move, as in, a move that involves the 3 planes of motion at the same time. This move, just like all the others in the sample workout, is relatively easy, and we call it controlling. You're going to start by doing a contraction or a Kegel, thus lifting your pelvic floor muscles up as if you were sucking in from a straw, and then you're going to be alternating in a circular motion by squeezing your walls. So first you're going to squeeze but only with your front, then squeeze only with your right wall, then squeeze only with your back wall, then squeeze only with your left wall, and you're going to do this circle twice, and then you're going to fully relax your muscles. Within our Pompoir community, we actually call this move the joystick. So yeah, join us if you want more dorky ways of calling sex moves. I want you to do 3 sets of 10 joysticks. Remember, 1 joystick involves an initial contraction, 2 full squeeze circles, and then relaxing your muscles again. Once again, remember to never ever hold your breath while you perform these moves, and to properly relax and stretch out your muscles for 5 minutes after your workout. And there you have it, your beginner-friendly vaginal gymnastics training. Okay, goddess, I hope you enjoyed that brief intro to vaginal gymnastics. There's a lot more to cover, but I think this was a nice summary of some of its key components. I could talk about this stuff for hours, and we can go over concepts such as fitness components like power, elasticity, agility. We can go over training positions. We can go over how to effectively bring these moves into the bedroom. We can talk about girth training. We can talk about using Pompoir for self-pleasure, strength plateaus. The list is endless. But we do cover most of these topics in the book, and we definitely cover them in the program in a very visual and practical way. But anyway, I hope you stick around because I plan on releasing a lot more videos just like this one, because my goal this year is to get vaginal gymnastics into the hands of any woman who wants to enhance her sex life. I love you all. Have a good night, goddess.